hello to you. And I'll just quickly introduce what we're doing here. My name is Manny, and welcome to our Super Civic Cyber Conversations. Mannys is a physical space. We host political and social justice gatherings, but Mannys is closed. But the work does not stop, and so we brought the programming to your home through the internet. And today we're so honored and lucky to be joined by Larry Baer, who's the CEO of the San Francisco Giants, to talk about how the Giants are dealing with all this, and to talk a little bit about the sports world and what's going on in that world. So Larry, thank you so much for joining us today, and we appreciate you being here.
Well, it's great being here, Manny, and thanks for doing this, and thanks for bringing people together virtually. It's a huge service.
My pleasure. So admittedly, Larry, I am not, anyone that knows me knows that I don't know a ton about sports. I have gone to many Giants games. I usually go when they do the LGBT night, but I've also gone not on LGBT night. So can you just give us a sense of where things are right now with the Giants and the stadium, and kind of, what's everyone doing? What's the state? What's kind of, give us a rundown of like where things are right now.
Sure. So just in terms of the Giants organization, and I think we're very thankful that the mayor issued a work from home order essentially very early on in this crisis. And all of the Giants are working from home. The order goes through April 30th. And we are connecting virtually, not just with each other, which is important, of course, and super critical to make sure we're all okay, but really with the community. And, we're the San Francisco Giants. We wear San Francisco across our chest, and we feel like really we're sort of part of a kind of a quasi public utility, if you will, even though that's not, technically what we are.
Okay.
So what we want to do is work with community partners to do everything we can to improve the situation in our community through messaging and through making facilities available. One quick example is we're going to be offering testing, drive-by testing in our parking lot a little later this week.
Okay, that's helpful. Also, if folks have questions for Larry, you don't have to wait till the Q&A. You can just type them in the question and answer box, and we can just get them going. So if you have a question, you can just write it in the Q&A box. So yeah, I guess that was going to be my next question. You've got this giant facility. Do the Giants own the stadium?
So the way we did it, so it was interesting because if you go through decades of the Giants, we were at Candlestick Park. Then there were attempts to build a ballpark before our group got involved with public money. Those were defeated. So we got involved about 25 years ago, and we did it with private money. So we own the ballpark. It was privately built, but it's on city land. So we have a partnership with the city.
Got it. I know because I'm interviewing Rick Welts, I think next week, and I know that the Warriors, they own their stadium, and it's causing, they have this huge piece of real estate that they have to pay for and no way to bring in revenue. So I guess that's
right.
Piece of this big property, but no way to make money. So how are you guys dealing with that?
So the Warriors are, and I'll answer that in a second. The Warriors are different from us because they bought the land and they then built the building.
Right.
We leased the land in a long-term lease, 99-year lease with the city, and then we operate the ballpark ourselves. So we're in a situation where we obviously aren't playing, and if you're not playing, you're not going to be generating revenues and all. But we've kept all of our employees on board. The folks that work day of game that are really the backbone of our organization.
Wow.
So that's the ushers and the ticket takers and the hot dog vendors, etc. Those people we've created a fund for, and we're rolling it out this week, where we're going to be supplementing their ability to exist basically through unemployment and through other things, because it's a tough situation obviously for them. So we have these funds that we've created, and we already have a couple $1 million in the fund.
Oh my God, Larry, that's amazing, and a testament to you and to the whole organization. Mannys is obviously a much smaller organization than the Giants, but we had to lay off our front of house staff. And what we're doing is we're doing stipend checks to the employees so that at least their basic needs are being met.
Yes.
So drive-by testing in the parking lot, is that
Yeah.
publicly announced? Do people know that?
It's going to be publicly announced. I may have jumped it a little bit, but it was referenced, I think, in a story in the Chronicle yesterday, that
Okay.
this is going to be one of the new testing sites.
Right.
And we're working really hard on messages. Our players are out there messaging. What we see ourselves being is we're not the biggest company in town, but we have a high profile. We have a megaphone,
Yes.
right? And so we're able to get messages out through our players who are heroes to many. And, I think generally, Manny, what's super important for baseball and all sports, but I think baseball in some ways has had a unique place in the world. Just like you say, you're not a huge fan, but you go to games.
Well, I didn't say I'm not a huge fan. I said I don't know a whole lot about it. I do like it. I'm not very knowledgeable about sports.
I mean, I can't give you a test. I can't quiz you on statistics.
Oh, I would lose. I don't even know what half the moves are in baseball, and I'm embarrassed to say I know.
That's actually kind of the point that I make is that we see the ballpark, especially its location, right kind of in the heart of the Mission Bay, China Basin, south of Market area, is kind of a gathering place for people.
Yes.
And, we have ticket prices that allow for people to come. So our whole point is to, and especially when we come out of this, and there will be a day we come out of this, that we believe, and we may be socially distanced for a while, but we believe that baseball has over the years had a unique role in bringing people back together in time of crisis. And I could give some examples of that.
Yes, I was going to ask you, please.
So it could do local crisis or national crisis. In the case of the earthquake here in 1989, and that was unique because it disrupted a World Series game.
Right.
There were a lot of shattered lives and shattered, experiences for people, and what's that?
Shattered buildings.
Shattered buildings and physical and emotional wreckage.
Yes.
And I think we're obviously experiencing that in even a bigger way globally now. But that's one small example. And after the earthquake, people came together, and in some ways it was less important who won or lost. Mm-hmm. We were all able to be at a ball game and kind of arm around each other. Yeah. After 9/11, it was a scary time for this country, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget a scene at Yankee Stadium in New York and at the Mets Park, Shea Stadium, mm-hmm. where people came together at a scary time, especially in New York, but really, nationally. And then go ahead.
No, please.
I was reading up actually with my son earlier today on even going back to World War II, after World War II, and even in 1918, because baseball is 150 years old, and the national pastime, as it were. And just talking about how baseball had served a role in elevating community spirit. People would regather in ballparks.
So that has been a running theme in a lot of these conversations. We've talked a lot about rebuilding and rebounding and that beautiful time when this will be over, that we can come back together. The first interview we did was with a drag queen, Heklina. And she talked about how after the AIDS epidemic, there was actually kind of a renaissance in the gay community. People, once there was a handle on the disease, people came back together with such fervor and such passion and love. And it was actually beautiful to see. The thing that makes me, and I think that's going to happen with this, totally. What's different though is this is a communicable disease that, I'm asking you, are you worried that this is going to change the way people think about gathering together in large crowds?
That's a really good question. And it's something we've talked about a lot internally at the Giants and through Major League Baseball and all the sports leagues. This is not unique to our league, right? And, the hope is there are different ways to consume our sport, right? Mm-hmm. And with television and now with new technology, AR and VR, there's ways uniquely through television. Mm-hmm. But I would say nothing replaces the experience in the park, in the arena. Yeah. Rick will talk about that vis-a-vis the Warriors. Right. We feel that very much vis-a-vis the Giants. So I think what we'll probably see as testing evolves,
Mm-hmm.
as vaccines evolve,
Mm-hmm.
as perhaps antibody testing
Yeah.
evolves, and that is where there's a lot of movement
Yeah.
to get that going quickly. And we've been talking with our medical directors at Major League Baseball and locally about to the point where people can feel safe being back together.
Right.
And I think that when that is, and I don't want to be in the prediction business because I have no idea when that is, but
Right.
when that is, that's going to be, I think, magical and beautiful for our community.
Oh, I can't wait for it to happen.
We're literally putting arm around each other
Oh.
safely. You mentioned AIDS, Manny, the AIDS crisis, the AIDS epidemic. I'll never forget back in 1993, and this was largely, Peter McGowan, who was the Giants' managing partner at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and we came together as an organization and did something called Until There's a Cure Day. And the players wore the ribbon on their uniform, the red ribbon, and we had a lot of education through the players delivering it. There was Dusty Baker and Barry Bonds, and two of our bigger names at the time, talking about what AIDS is and what AIDS isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe, had a role in educating and sensitizing our community. And, we may need to do that with this crisis. It's just like we're all talking about social distancing.
Right.
We would deploy our players who, in some ways, you saw what Steph did with Anthony Fauci the other day, Steph Curry.
Yeah, it was
To
beautiful.
deploy our players, because it's a different market. They're not the people that need information aren't all necessarily watching CNN.
Right. So, do you guys actually, if I'm correct, under your leadership, you did the first benefit ever by a professional sports team to fight AIDS in 1994, and that was something that you stewarded. So I want to thank you for that, obviously, and for your early leadership and courage at a time. People don't often think of professional sports as a place for advocacy around social justice. It's not that is not always, those aren't always paired, but the Giants, it seems, have not been afraid of getting in front of issues. And I guess I want to take a second and ask you about that, and why, if you think that's true, and why that is.
Well, I think it's imperative for sports franchises to do it. I think, some do and some don't. Some are better than others.
Right.
I think that, it's sort of like when we wear San Francisco across our chest, when we go out and take the field, we do that proudly.
Yeah.
And we do that with a symbolism. And that symbolism is we want to represent our community, all of our community. Right. And that's why, like, our LGBT Q days are so important to us. And we convert sort of everything into those iconic marks, our home run counters and everything. Yeah. And I think that it's one of the things that gives me a lot of satisfaction, because you're going to win some and lose some.
Yeah.
You're going to provide entertainment to people who are big fans. Mm-hmm. But if you can have, a person walk away from the ballpark experience or the television experience and feel that it was inclusive, that's a huge part of life. Yeah. I think there's a story, and there was on the Today's Chronicle, Joan Ryan wrote a piece about what sports means to society, and we're all without it. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a feeling of pride being San Franciscans, and that gets represented no place better than at the ballpark.
Yeah, it is one of the few things that can bring massive amounts of people together who are very different socioeconomically, racially, religiously, around common identity and pride. The values of a city or a country are diffuse, right? But a sports team has players and people and a face and a physical place that bonds people together. So it's a very powerful tool. And I think we are feeling the emptiness of not having those places in a city that loves its sports.
I would just, on that point, the socioeconomic, one of my favorite scenes was during the World Series. I remember looking into the stands, and I saw somebody, I think who was like a stockbroker, next to somebody who was from a Boys and Girls Club, who we have a lot of corporations that buy tickets and then donate them. And they donated, I think it was actually a World Series game. And the stockbroker in his suit and the Boys and Girls Club child or youth who was 16, 17 years old, they were high-fiving and hugging, and they were complete strangers when the game started.
It brings people together. I moved to San Francisco in 2012, and one of my first memories was going down to the corner of 18th and Castro. Not normally a corner you think of that's super into sports games, but the fire trucks were there, and the roads were closed, and folks were TPing the phone wires with toilet paper and because we won the World Series that year. And I became a baseball fan that night, probably. I was checking on my phone earlier just to see Buster Posey, who I think is the most attractive Giant person, but also is probably one of the better known ones. And he's got, almost 500,000 people that follow him on Instagram. And you mentioned earlier utilizing the players' social medias and their megaphones, right now. And how do you see them being best used, and how do they want to be used during this time of crisis?
I think in a time of crisis, they need the messages that you talk about. Buster's 500,000 followers, and we have players with all sorts. And we have somebody like Johnny Cueto, who is, has an incredible Instagram account in Spanish, in English and Spanish, both. We have a large Spanish-speaking player group and following. Right. It's getting the messages out. So it's donations. It's donations of masks. There was incredible mask. I think it was 18th and Mission, where incredible number of masks were donated to San Francisco General Hospital and others. And other institutions. So those are the messages that we're going to get. The players are going to, some do it on their own, some do it with the team, some call us in a time of crisis and say, how can I be most helpful? I may not live here, but I want to help the San Francisco community. Right. Just an example, in all times, players do amazing things. Buster and Kristen started a fund to support research in pediatric cancer at UCSF and other hospitals. Wow. And that's just something he's been doing for years. And as a way of giving back. We have a 100% participation program, and we ask each player to give back in some way.
Amazing. Folks, if you have questions for Larry, you can start typing them in the Q&A box. I'm going to ask one or two more questions, and then we'll get to your questions. I was wondering, are the sports executives or owners from various different baseball teams kind of collaborating, and are you guys on calls about how you can all work together right now? Is there something happening between the different sports? Activists, we like to do a lot of coalition building. And I guess my question is, is there coalition building happening right now in the sports world?
Yes. And the example we used about our ballpark workers fund, for instance, we got, a number of teams raised their hand early and said, we'd love to do that to support workers. By definition, there are no games. Those people that work at the facility are not going to have work. And an example of what you're talking about, Manny, all 30 Major League Baseball clubs said, I'm in to a minimum $1 million fund for that.
Workers.
All 30 for the ballpark workers in their community.
That is amazing.
And that became sort of the industry standard. And, we had calls, we had league-wide calls, and it's sort of like, you weren't going to say no, or you weren't going to hedge, or you weren't going to say, I'll only do $500,000. You were going to do it. And then each team figures out the best way to do it in their community and do additional. So we've already raised another $1 million, so we're at $2 million. So that's an example of that kind of collaboration. And another beautiful example was just a couple of days ago. It was really pretty amazing. There's a company called Fanatics that makes the jerseys. Okay. And they're based in Pennsylvania. They're near Philadelphia, near New York. Philadelphia and New York are sort of their hometown. And they said, you know what? We're making jerseys for the year, but who knows? We can pick that up later. We're going to convert that jersey material into masks. Really? And they're producing 1 million masks to help in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and New York City
Oh my God.
and New Jersey. Another really, really beautiful example.
My last question for this portion is about how you're thinking about the future. We've already talked about, the virus, but beyond that, I mean, how do you see, the Giants and the Giants Stadium evolving over the next 10 years in terms of its place in the city and what would your dream be of what
my dream is really the Giants are, a baseball team, but we're so much more. Where we provide sports, entertainment, and frankly, Manny, we provide community.
Yeah.
And so to get deeper into that, one initiative that obviously we're not stopping during this, but we're going to keep moving on is in the Mission Bay, Mission Rock area. We have a project that delivers 40% affordable housing, and it's our parking lot that's being converted.
You're building
housing, office, a big public park.
Wow. I've heard about this. Mission Rock. Yes, I've heard.
It's called Mission Rock. It actually went to the ballot, and it's tough to get widespread approval for anything in San Francisco at times. But we got 74% approval on that.
Wow.
Yeah. So the construction is we're just about ready to start construction on that. So I see us creating an inclusive neighborhood with 40% affordable housing to attack some of the biggest problems. Wow. COVID now, obviously is, 10 times everything else, but we're going to come back to to normalcy, hopefully sooner rather than later, where affordable housing, income inequality, environment and open space are going to be issues that we think the Giants can attack.
I have one more question, actually, and this is someone that's thinking about San Francisco so often and so much, and has been so deeply involved in what San Francisco is. What do you think the city government should do to do right by the recovery for the people who've lost their jobs and also the small businesses that have had to shutter? I think most people feel, and I would put myself in this bucket, really proud of how seriously our government took this early on. We're proud of our public health director. And I haven't heard anyone say any negative word about how we're handling this. I think people are really proud of it. I think part two is how do we get back to work,
Right.
And how,
I think a couple of things. I think the private sector, because we're, squarely in the private sector, is going to have to do everything possible to keep employment levels where they are. Yeah. Right? Before the crisis, where they were before the crisis. So, Mark Benioff, I think, showed incredible leadership by saying for 90 days, Salesforce is not, and they're the largest employer in San Francisco, we are not changing our employment patterns. Other technology companies, that sometimes are controversial, have done really tremendous work along those lines as well. And so I think that we need the private sector needs to model that. Because there's going to be pain as we come out of this. There's going to be pain from what we all experience. I also think in the very short term, in the Giants and other sports franchises, public gathering areas, even if it's only on television, if we can't do it, have the return to the gatherings, have to honor the heroes.
Right.
And there have been such heroic work from the healthcare workers, other first responders, police, fire, etc. We've got to honor them, and that's going to bring us together.
Got it. All right. A question from Ken Alston. How are your players spending this period? Are players at the major and minor league levels remaining in their team city? Is there flexibility if they need to return to their hometown to be with family? Yeah. What are the players doing?
It's a really good question. It's a pretty scary time for the players because they were all in Arizona. All the players were at spring training, which are two sites, Arizona and Florida. And what happened was, as the crisis began to emerge, the players, we had to shut down the camps.
Right.
And you say, okay, we'll just go home. Well, it's not that simple. We have some international players who are from the Dominican or Venezuela, and going home either wasn't an option or a very difficult option.
Right.
So we've been able to support them, through some payments. The other thing is players, people talk about the big name players, and they obviously have been compensated well over the years. But there are a lot of players in the minor leagues who aren't that different than our day of game workers who, are struggling to get to a point where they're secure financially, but they're not there. And so we're trying to, we have some expense coverage of them until we figure out when we can start baseball.
Great. Stacy wants to know if there's plans in the cards to lower ticket prices so more people can attend. And maybe I assume the question is kind of a more general long-term question, but also I'll add on top of that specifically, like when this is all over, are you thinking about creative ways to get people to come back to the stadium?
Absolutely, Stacy. I mean, we have a whole group working on that and thinking about that. And I think you're going to find that we're going to be offering all sorts of incentives and breaks and everything just to get people back in to experience what we were talking about, the healing. I mean, I think, I have a vision of when we're first back, the healthcare workers will be throwing out the first pitch. Mm-hmm. And we'll be honoring them throughout. And we want everybody to be part of that. So ticket price is going to be less important than engagement. Mm-hmm. And so that's going to be the Giants and I think other teams, but I know we're going to be out front on that for sure. Super important.
Mm-hmm. If there are any more questions, now's the time to type them in. I'll just do one quick plug, Larry, which is, I feel like athletes have enormous followings, and oftentimes this is a supposition of mine, but those people would be very hard to reach by your typical politicians, your activists, right? And it's really encouraging to see that San Francisco athletes are willing to utilize that following to get the message out. And I really hope in my lifetime that we see a new generation of athlete activists who can actually get in touch with people who otherwise would never listen to a politician or an activist or someone in advocacy.
No, I think that's exactly right. And I think that's why, something like what Steph did with Anthony Fauci. I mean, because you're going to have, the mainstream media is not necessarily, there's a whole population, especially of younger folks, that are not following the politicians. We have 2 children that are on college campuses, and they have their own sources. But, we have a son who does listen to what the athletes say and what they post, right, and the lifestyle choices they take, right, and the role modeling. We really encourage, and we can't mandate it or compel it, right, but we really encourage positive messaging, the messaging from the athletes to the fans. And that goes back to until there's a cure day when, we can all say things, but when Barry Bonds and Dusty Baker said something to a 17-year-old about what AIDS is and what AIDS isn't, right, that 17-year-old took notice. Right. We can say politicians can stay at home, socially distance, but when Jimmy Garoppolo or Buster Posey or Pablo Sandoval says right, it gets reinforced.
Yes. All right. Last question is from Sam. Is or does the MLB coordinate with other professional sports leagues during times like this? NBA, NHL, MLS. And there was a specific, question about how NHL seems to be acting on its own with the San Jose Sharks, encouraging people to come to their games even when the city and county told people to stay home. So are you guys working between the different sports leagues?
Yeah, I think baseball has done a good job. We're all kind of on the same page in terms of working with the other leagues. It was at the beginning, it was a little uneven, right? Because you had two leagues right in the middle of their seasons, really 3. You had the NBA, the NHL, and MLS. So you had sort of an uneven thing where it was unclear whether a game would be played or not, and county orders and state mandates were coming later. I think that really the honest answer is when Rudy Gobert, who was a player for the Utah Jazz, tested positive, and then it just became, that was kind of like the clarion call that we just got to stop. Right. That you couldn't try to play, with smaller crowds or whatever. We just have to stop. Right. Sports has to take a backseat to the public health, right, considerations. And I think we are, and I think now the answer is now we are coordinated. Before it was a little disjointed.
Got it. Well, if you guys check out the chat link, my operator is about to post in the link to support Mannys. We are closed, and we need your help to stay open and reopen after this is all done. I would like to announce that in honor of your birthday, April 8th, an anonymous person has made a generous donation to Mannys, and I want to just publicly say that and express how appreciative I am to this person who's donated to us in your honor. But also all the folks who've decided to take an opportunity to support us by becoming a sponsor. Sponsorship levels start at $36 a month, and it is exactly what we need right now to help us get through this crisis. So thank you for the folks who are becoming sponsors. The link is in the chat. Larry, the final word?
Well, my final word is I just would reinforce what you just said, Manny, and everybody. The civic discourse that you facilitate is critical to a functioning society. And it really is. And so everything you do, I'm really concerned about journalism in the United States. Yeah. In today's world, I know you've had seminars about that, webinars, yeah, etc. And we need everybody. It takes a village to continue the civic discourse. And my last thing is everybody, please stay safe, stay healthy, yeah, and let's dream about the day when we do get back to the ballpark and put our arms around each other.
Hey, I look forward to watching a Giants game with you when this is all over. Okay.
Right. Oh no, we're going to be one of the earlier games. We're going to be sitting together. Yes. And we're going to hang out together. And yeah, I'll say to Giants fans right now, if you're looking for something to do Sunday and not go out, you can turn on and watch a Giants game now on NBC Sports Bay Area. So that's one of an old game, not a current game, obviously, right, a classic, a World Series game.
Thank you for all that you do. Thank you, Larry. Thank you to the folks who've tuned in. We appreciate all of you. Thank you to my team, Sam, Jupiter, and Ram. And if you'd like to tag us on social media, it's @WelcomeToMannys. And again, you can click the link in the chat box to support my small business. Larry, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bless you, Manny.
Bye-bye.